Finishing the vault. Diagonal lattice. Rhombus crisscross struts. Diagonal lattice is applied so the vault gets rigid. So it is stable towards forward and backwards movement as well as any diagonal movement and applied forces. Once all the layers are applied, the entire vault becomes a monolithic solid shell. The wood provides it a slight elasticity, which are necessary for hardcore earthquakes. Most structures that fail in the earthquakes are rigid and flat. This diagonal lattice is made of the same 150 by 25 mm or 6 by 1 inch timber pieces as we used to make the arches. The method is shown in the video. Distance was approximately 50 centimeters or 20 inches between these diagonals. They were installed in both directions with 100 mm or 4 inch nails. If tight on budget, one could use less of these diagonal struts. The quantity of anything, of course, is a result of how much you're planning to load on the roof. We safely loaded 30 centimeter or 1 foot of clay, earth and turf, plus 4 feet of snow load. I will stick to this method I'm describing here with the same amount of timber as wood is cheap in our country. And I want compressive strength due to unpredictable weather in the future and the ability to load the home with at least 1 meter of soil. If you're not planning on submerging your home, one could get away with a lot less wood. Remember that this vault was rated at about 1 kilogram per square centimeter or 10 tons per square meter. That's 10,000 kilograms per square meter. Once the diagonal lattice was installed, we applied 2 more timber pieces to create an outer arch. The outer struts from under are working in tension when they bend. The inner strut is working in compression. These 2 new struts formed an arc that will also work in compression. Once the entire roof is loaded, we're actually making it easier for all the arches that want to straighten and pop out. The entire arch starts working in compression once loaded. So the method of forming the outer arches goes like this. We applied the same timber plank starting from the bottom and gently bending in and nailing as we go. The ends on the joints did not want to bend in a hurry, so we assisted them with a hoist ratchet and using some screws. By using a rope to pull these ends towards the diagonal lattice layer, we attached the hoist ratchet mechanism to anything we could find on the opposite side. And then we screwed the ends and put a couple of nails. Big problem because we have a connection there on the previous board and here. So we're removing it. It's where the stump is, where the little area, that's where it broke. We trimmed any parts that were excessively sticking out on the joints.
чтобы они знали.
Ёлки-палки, вообще летают. Где летал, где бегал?
This is what it all looked like at the end of the step. I was really joyful once the stage was completed. The vault was beginning to take shape. It took us roughly 25 days at 4 hours a day to get this done, or 2 weeks for 2 people at a full working day. This of course included the digging out of the bottom 1 foot of soil and everything that this vault is standing upon. I also took 2 days out to go for purchases of glass, chimney flues, air pipes, etc. The roof. The roofing outer struts went in next. These are what are going to support and hold the following: the waterproofing layer, 2 layers of insulation, clay lock, earthen berm, and the snow load. We first started to do every second strut so we could use it as a ladder to climb on. You would need to do this if you had a more vertical arch, but in our case the arch was shallow and it was easy and safe to get up without them being installed in this way. Also, due to the low-grade wood, it became problematic to fit all the other planks into the gaps as they were slightly larger, so we abandoned this method. We had to trim some of them so they could fit in. Connecting the planks one by one snug and adjacent to the previous one would have worked better and accelerate the process. I believe it is even safe for kids. Look at me sliding down. On the shot you can see how the 6-meter length of timber are positioned on a 5-meter deep room. Small overlap on the back of about 20 centimeters or 8 inches, and the rest is all out in the front. Knowing the standard length of timber helps you to avoid wastage, so you can get most out of the material. In fact, this applies to any material. At some parts we use shorter length, as you can see here, and I would not recommend it. It is better to have that extra length instead of not having it. At the same time, if you absolutely tighten wood and you can already gauge where you will cut the awning, i.e. for my design, the sides needed to be roughly 60 centimeter, 2 feet shorter. We pre-cut this extra length to give us a nice awning for the sun. It also created an extended roof so the rain or snow does not fall on the glass facade. I will come back to the shade awning just now because it needs to have a metal sheeting. Once all the other roof timber coverage was installed, we painted it with copper sulfate to protect from any fungi growing. Because this is the layer between the inside and outside, it could be a place for condensation to form. Warm temperature of the timber meeting the freezing cold earth above. A layer of plastic went up temporarily to get it all dry till the next morning. The same plastic will act as one of the waterproofing layers. We cut the plastic sheeting into 10-meter strips. Remember, the arches were 760 centimeters, so that gave us an extra 120 centimeters or 4 feet past the walls on each of the sides. To temporarily hold the plastic, crisscross the rope diagonally to those rebar pegs in the corners, or place some wood slab offcuts or timber boards on top. This will not hold in a strong wind, but mild breeze should be okay. Checking the weather and planning the task for tomorrow is always a good practice at the end of the working day. The gaps in the front, just above the front arc, were insulated with foam from above as well as from underneath. This is done so that the cold air would not enter the room from the front. The vapor barrier went in first. It is important to know the correct side of placing the vapor barrier. One side allows the water to get through and the one side stops it. Also remember to overlap. The layer of plastic was installed after the vapor barrier. For now, we did not install the one for the back burial, but please allow some space for it to slide in. The roof will naturally have an ever so slightly lean towards either the front or the back. The plastic should be shingled over the other one so that the water does not go under the next sheet of plastic. i.e., the plastic that's on the lower side should be under the plastic that's going towards the higher side, just like the shingles on the roof. Insulation went in next. We used 2 layers of foam with shiny side. They were 8 millimeters or 1/3 of an inch thick. Then insulation was stapled, only on the front and the back of the house in order not to puncture the plastic layers. Do not puncture your plastic as it is one of the waterproofing layers. 1 layer of shiny side down and 1 layer of shiny side up to create a flask effect. I would use a thicker option if budget allows. Also, when we discuss John Hade's book on umbrella solar passive house, you will see how he layered plastic, then insulation, then plastic, then more insulation, and finishing with plastic. He didn't use the costly bitumen membrane, and triple layer of plastic as described would be sufficient, provided you do not have anything that will puncture all 3 layers. In John Hade's method, if 1 layer of plastic should get a tear, the other 2 layers would be intact as they're protected by the foam insulation. It is a method I will experiment in my own home and share the process with you later on in the course. In my own wetlands, I have successfully used double layer of plastic, but I lined the hole first with a free second-hand carpet to make it soft so no branches stick out. On the footage you can see we did not extend the insulation at this stage, as it would all rip up by the legs of the ladder that constantly was used to assist us. I will show you what we did with insulation a little later on. If you're wondering why so little insulation in Siberia, well, the grass turfs as well as the clay with straw also has some insulation properties. If you have bigger budget, go for it. It will perform even better, especially if you want to use less firewood. Firewood is not a problem here because this particular structure was built right next to the forest. The heavy bitumen membrane, which is the second layer of waterproofing, should go on soon after to hold our roofing sandwich in place. Plastic, insulation and vapor barrier are all lightweight and could easily fly away in a gust of wind. Even our heavy bitumen membrane nearly took off. The bitumen membrane. The bitumen membrane is brittle and also should not be cut longer than 1 foot past the roof. Every time I slid down like a kid, I tore it when landing with my heels on the earth. The plastic layer is rolled like a sausage, so the legs of the ladder do not damage it. If you did cut the plastic layer too short, you could always insert a strip under the roofing plastic or membrane to extend it further away in order to keep the sides of the home dry. The bitumen membrane is installed as shown in the video, and with practice you will get the hang of it. If unsure, practice with a few pieces on the floor. The colder the temperature of the air, the longer it takes to warm up in order to fuse with adjacent membrane.
У тебя пластиковая штука сейчас это. А идет брызги. It can tear. Right here it's already started to tear.
Once the temperature is super cold, it is very hard to work with bitumen membrane as it is brittle and does not spread nicely. I suggest picking a warm, sunny day for doing the job. The burning tool we used uses petrol, which is much cheaper than buying propane LPG gas bottles. Once the waterproofing was installed, we finished cutting the sun and rain awning. I used a pole from the tent to get a gentle curve drawn. It is easier done with 2 people. And then we chainsawed the unnecessary excess. The next step was to finish the metal flashing. For that we placed a sheet of thin metal perpendicular to the struts. I scratched out a 3 cm or just over 1 inch by 1/5 of an inch. The sheet was taken down and cut in the following way using the special metal cutting scissors. Play around by pushing one handle towards the other when you cut, otherwise it just pinches the metal. The one side gets a 90-degree bend upwards by 10 centimeters or 4 inches. This will support the ends of the grass turfs. The opposite side is cut according to the shape of the roof, with an extra 3 cm overlap. You could leave an extra 5 cm overlap and pre-cut it on the top as shown. Once placed on the roof, we made a cut every 20 cm or 8 inches through the 90-degree upward bend. This immediately allowed the sheeting to start curving along the shape of the vault. Short 2 cm or just under an inch self-tapping roofing metal screws with a rubber washer, you'll need at least 150 of those, were used to attach the metal sheeting to the roofing struts. The right size of screws did not go through to the other side. Also, screws were installed close to the 90-degree rib and on the front, especially taking great care on the overlaps. If the front curve did not match the previous one, you just pre-cut right there on the top once the metal sheet is mounted. So one piece of metal sheeting of 2.4 by 1.2 meters or 8 by 4 feet was split into 3. Do not cut all 3 of them same width, as the one for the sides needs to be shallower than the one in the middle. Once the front curve was all trimmed and aligned along the 3 pieces of metal, I made a cut every 10 centimeters right until the front edge of the wooden timber strut. Then I hammered these overlaps towards the 1-inch thick roof board. The 5mm or that 1/5 of an inch of that extra length worked really well, as it curved underneath, thus completely covering the edge of the beam. By the way, In my own build, these roofing outer timber struts I would impregnate with anti-fungi, for the very least a few coats of linseed oil, especially in the front 1 meter or 3 feet, as they are most prone to water. The metal covers from above, but from underneath they're open to the elements. In the future, one could cover the underside with plywood, which will create a nice finish. Installation of the air tubes and covering them with insulation. I will do a detailed lesson on airflow in the near future. This was a good practice run to install air tubing using a standard sewer pipe. It will deliver fresh and preheated air in winter as well as summer. Whilst installing it, I came to some conclusions that I'd like to share with you. Firstly, I would not take a kink up and down as I did here. The pipe should gently curve from lower down, going upwards into the house.
In the center, it's too high, there it's too low, there it's too low. So we're going to take from the center, move it there, so slopes down. Slopes down so the water can leak out. Only way to see it is to get to the same level as the pipe.
The little kink will make a similar to P-trap in the grey water piping system, and the air will just get trapped without moving, because in our pipe it went up and then down and then up again. That should not be the case. And secondly, I would not start it so high up. I would start it lower down, and I would split them into two, not joining into one. So the one of them would deliver fresh air into the oven, and the other one would just deliver fresh air into the room. But as I said, I will cover the air pipes extensively in the future and not right now. The one pipe on the left, we decided to cover in insulation on top. This way we extended the insulation, and this made sure that the air was preheated, that was going to come from outside in cold winter by the warm walls underneath the insulation. Creating the back wall. On the back wall, I got cedar offcuts called wood slab for free, which I brought on my car. They were cut in the following way to fit in between the back foundation log and the back earthen wall. It is very important to stand sturdy when doing this cutting with a chainsaw, as it bounced and ripped a part of my gumboot.
Yeah, that's what I did. I did my first board. Collier did that first one. I did the second one. That's where I nearly cut part off. I'll show you how I did that. And there is a little cut out there. So it's working well. We're going to put some plastic there at the bottom so that it doesn't seep water in. It's a very low tech construction. And we've also cut our little edge there, which came out really nice. So you can start to picture the view here.
На месте.
Там подрезаться не будет, она
Подкладку делай.
подойти.
I was not holding the chainsaw properly, and I was not standing in a good position. Thanks God for my boots, and I would recommend steel-capped boots for myself and you for next time when doing this task. And hold the chainsaw properly. Stand balanced and cut slow. Do not rush. Stand in a good balanced position. Because I was doing a sideways cut, when I finished the cut, it just carried on going towards my toes. At the bottom, the wood slab was sandwiched to the log, and at the top were applied a couple of screws connecting to the top arc. The cutout piece was removed from the top to follow the shape of the arc. Collier did a better job as he had more practice. He did the right side and I did the left side. He measured and looked at the angle of the arch at that point, and then he cut out this piece so the arc would meet the top part of the wood slab.
So that line is actually should have been higher, but it's okay. We'll live and we'll learn. That's much better. So I drew it by the bottom line, but actually needs to come to here.
Ну уже меньше, Лёш.
Все, он больше там не пойдет.
Намного меньше.
О, прошел.
А чё?
Коля делать, я это...
Да, Коля пусть прячется, у него это...
Потому что тут таврик еще, тут нужно для таврика как бы разбираться.
Да, Коля это сделает, у него это есть такая.
Я просто никогда не делал такое. Надь, Надь, дай мне ткань сюда белую.
Important to mention is to place vapor barrier here as well, that makes sure that the soil does not fall through the gaps between the wooden slabs. The vapor barrier got stapled as well. At this point we also needed to bring in those intake air pipes that I'll mention in the future. These ran on the side. The air pipe was positioned on rammed earth, so it does not shift when more earth is applied. Ramming the pipe will not help compress the earth underneath and just shatter the plastic. I heated it a little so I did not need to run to the shop to get a 22.5 angle connection. As I mentioned, the pipe should go from lower to higher entering the room. This scenario will allow for uninterrupted airflow from cool outside air to warmer back wall. It is similar to an earth pipe. For earth-cooled air in summer, I would recommend this pipe to be made of metal to instantly transfer the cool temperature of the earth into the pipe and thus cool down your home. PVC pipe has somewhat resistance to temperature transfer. Again, this was a budget story. Steel pipes are costly in comparison to PVC ones. After the pipe, we gently rammed the soil for the first 10 cm 4 inches so not to crack the PVC. We also used a wooden offcut to disperse the pressure from our ramming device. Thereafter, we applied more soil and rammed hard. The soil pushed onto the wood slab offcuts. The rest of the soil was built up on top of that.
Ну, слушай, как сможешь?
Once the wall was in place, then we covered and shaped the mount and applied the insulation and plastic on the back. The pipe for the chimney was installed at this stage. We held it at 45 degrees and drew an oval for the sandwiched pipe. Sandwich pipe is safe as it is already insulated, but please make sure that you place it roughly halfway through the wood. After some time, the insulation can settle on the high end, which makes it very hot, especially if the tar ignites inside the flue. We made the hole a little bigger and nailed a special heat-resistant rope for fireplaces all around the oval to receive the pipe.
Забубенился iPhone.
Залезьте и вы сейчас щелкните и пойдете.
I even ran a sleeve from outside for the internet cable or anything else that was needed to be installed later on in the house.
Все. Ага.
The plastic gets cut in a plus shape smaller than the pipe, and then it can be pushed in gently through that plus, stretching ever so slightly, and a little bit of rope can be used to clamp it. I created a channel to make sure that the water from uphill could be diverted around the house. The back plastic and the ones from the sides, the waterproofing layer, should run until this channel. This way all the water coming in from the roof will be diverted through the channel, a homemade gutter, and all the water coming in from above will be diverted in the same channel. In the future, I would deepen this channel or even go further by either cementing it or using plastic with some stones and geotextile on top, covering the stones and tucking in on the sides. But a channel with some plastic will do. The plastic just needs to be out of the sun, hence the stones need to be placed in it. If it is just a channel without anything, then it would need a little cleaning once a year after some debris covers it up. Once the pipes and insulation were in place, we added some soil to bring any irregularities away and then started to apply the clay lock. The reason for the clay lock is so that when we start layering the turfs, that they would not slide down and rip the waterproofing membrane. Soil is heavy and wet clay has a tendency to slide. To create a clay lock, we used my cement mixer to mix in the clay and water into a thickish soup. Water went in first, I believe 4 parts to 20 parts of clay, or 1 to 5. Please do your own test, as it also depends on how wet your clay is, or in other words, how saturated it is with water. This applies also to the sand or any mix you make. This thick soup was mixed in a large wheelbarrow with straw and applied by hand onto the roof. The clay lock took us a couple of days of hard work, but it was done at the end. The clay from the front of the house was also used up.
И можно и на ту сторону, наверное, переходить.
Once the clay lock was done, we threw in some clay as well as subsoil to create level step and applied the rectangles of turf like a Mayan pyramid. Important to note that they are applied not in a way to follow the shape of the vault, but rather creating the level steps to horizon that follow the shape of the vault. This is done so that they do not slide off. Any irregularities can and will be covered with additional soil.
Раз!
О, как хорошо.
Домику. Ой. Чувствует, его ручками гладят, и крышечку ему, причесочку ему делают.
Курево без мата, все.
Ну,
Обязательно.
Ну, естественно, что ты.
можно это, можно, видишь, гладим его, вот, видишь, прическу делаем ему.
Ну да, вот так вот.
Это еще с битюмена.
Even after the grass turfs start growing. The grass turfs were taken from 3 places. First, original cutout from the side of the house as well as the future berm. Second, the pathway leading towards the house that was also dug out level. Remember this tip, soil is gold and never should be mixed with subsoil when digging. Third, being on the slope, I decided to make a moon-shaped pond that was edged on the lower end with a level berm. Clay was taken from the front of the house. It was the quickest way to dispose of large amount of clay. I used a wheelbarrow to create a dam wall of this little pond. So the turfs from this entire moon shape were the exact amount we needed to complete the hobbit roof. I used a wheelbarrow to drive and create a level terrace or dam wall. and the turfs from this entire moon shape were the exact amount needed to complete the Hobbit roof. When loading the earth, please do 45 centimeter, 1.5 foot from each end, and alternate. Do not load the vault only from one side. It will bulge and will not be safe. Remember, wood is still flexible. Also, when we got to about 2 meters or 6 feet high, we saw that we needed to load the clay lock from the top as well, to apply the pressure from the top before carrying on working on the sides. Once the clay lock was done all around, we continued loading the sides with turf. Alternate 2 rows on the left and 2 rows on the right to spread out and balance the pressure. When digging the turf pieces from the site where the home is, please try and carry them slightly away from where the berm will be. Because these turfs were placed upside down right next to the edge of the hole, we had to excavate them out, and they already started to rot under the weight of the clay above. Turfs get removed first, then get packed neatly nearby for future use past the 3 meter or 9 feet mark from the actual walls. When loading the earth, please do 45 centimeters or 1.5 foot from each side and alternate. Do not load the vault only from one side. It will bulge out due to the pliability of the wood and will not be safe. When we got to about 2 meters high, we saw that the top needed to be loaded with more pressure. Thus we added the subsoil on the top before proceeding loading the sides. At that time, due to the bulge, we inserted an additional support column under the front arch that I will discuss just now. The clay lock went straight onto the bitumen membrane, and on top we loaded at 2 to 3 inches of earth first before applying the. Once the clay lock was done all around, we continued loading the sides with turf, alternating 2 rows on the left and 2 rows on the right, and so on. When digging the turf pieces from the site where the home will be in place, try and carry them slightly away from where the berm will be. Because these turfs were placed upside down right next to the edges of the hole, we had to excavate them out, and they already started to rot under the weight of the clay above. Don't underestimate the duration that something on the construction site will be left at one spot for. When my friend started digging the turfs, he thought he would finish the home super soon, and thus the upside down turfs would be all good by the time he needed them. We only ended up using them 6 months later. Thus said, the turfs should be removed and stacked neatly nearby for future use. This should be done at least 3 meters or 9 feet away from the hole or future walls. Additional turfs are got by making a terrace or dam wall in a smiley moon shape. Some of the excess clay that was dug out and dumped in the front of the house went up onto the roof under the clay lock. The excess was dumped, creating a terrace dam wall. I was dumping it, trying to keep the wall level. This was the fastest way to get rid of a large amount of subsoil and clay. Remember that we first remove the turfs. Never pile clay above the topsoil. For dams, clay must lock on clay. That way they will not leak. I rolled my wheelbarrow down, fully loaded, but even as it was so strong, the frame that held an axle still bent. Collier repaired it with a welder.
So there is a step in the board. It needs to be in line so that wheelbarrow rolls over it.
Don't throw your wheelbarrow loaded with heavy soil. Back to the finished turfs on the clay lock. One could sprinkle some compost and additional topsoil with various easy-growing indigenous seeds to boost the process of beautifying the Hobbit roof. This finishes the roofing process. The glass facade and door can only be installed once the earth is loaded. Because this is a wooden vault, they are subject to slight shifting, which glass cannot accommodate.
Ну, ты шутник. Короче,